My name is Emerson Carter, 38 years old, living in a quiet coastal town where the piano pieces I compose often blend with the sound of the waves. That evening, I walked into a luxurious hotel filled with pride. My husband, Lucas, had been appointed project director at a major architectural firm. But only minutes later, when Lucas took the microphone to thank the person who has always believed in and supported me the most, and said the name Veronica Hale, the company's vice president, my heart felt like it was being crushed. On the large screen behind him, photos of the two of them appeared, hand in hand, in front of hundreds of eyes. Have you ever thought you were living in a beautiful love story, only to discover you were merely a supporting character? Leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe to my channel so I can tell you everything that happened after that night, and why it changed my life forever. I still remember clearly the very first morning after our wedding, when Lucas walked into the kitchen with messy hair and sleepy eyes, holding 2 cups of hot coffee. He set one down in front of me and said, "There's nothing that starts a marriage better than having coffee the right way." From that day on for 12 years, every morning he made me a cup of coffee with exactly 3 spoons of cream and a dash of cinnamon, as if that flavor had become an inseparable part of our life. In return, I always made sure the fridge was stocked with the strawberry jam he loved to eat with toast. On Sunday nights, no matter how busy we were, we kept a private ritual, sitting by the ebony piano in the living room, playing a duet of our favorite song. I usually played the melody and Lucas accompanied with chords. Sometimes he would purposely play a wrong note to make me laugh, and I would give him a mock glare but keep playing, as if our story always had small off-key notes that never ruined the music we made together. In the 3rd year of our marriage, I was offered the chance to tour across Europe. It was the kind of opportunity any musician would dream of, but when Lucas got a major project in Seattle, I turned it down. I remember that evening as we sat on the balcony watching the rain fall, I said, "I'm choosing to stay. Not because I don't want to go, but because you need me here." Lucas looked at me for a long time, then pulled me into a tight embrace. I'll never forget this. From then on, I became the one behind the scenes, making sure everything at home ran smoothly so he could fully focus on his work. I managed all our finances, from the mortgage, insurance to saving for the future. He often said the reason he could work with peace of mind was because of me. Our biggest plan was to open a community music school in the suburbs, where houses had red roofs and tree-lined streets. We dreamed of a 2-story building with bright classrooms, a small concert hall, and a garden where students could practice outdoors in summer. Every time we passed an empty house, Lucas would take my hand and say, "Do you think this place would have enough rooms for a small orchestra?" I would smile, imagining the sound of violins, drums, and laughter echoing down the hallways. In the early years, we didn't have much. I taught extra classes in the evenings and on weekends, while Lucas worked for smaller firms to build his experience. But every month we still set aside a small amount for our school fund, a large glass jar in the living room filled with crisp $20 bills and loose change. Every few months, we would deposit that money into our joint savings account. On some winter nights when snow fell thick outside, we sat by the fireplace calculating costs. Land rental, renovations, buying instruments, hiring teachers. Lucas always said, "We'll get there. We just need to be patient." I believed him the way I believed in every note I played. We faced many hardships together. My mother passed away from heart disease, his father had an accident and needed surgery. Each time we held on to each other even tighter, reminding ourselves that material things could weigh us down, but love and connection were what kept us standing. Lucas always seemed interested in my work. He often stopped by my piano classes at the end of the day, leaning against the doorframe and waving to the students. Once, a little girl whispered to me, "He looks at you like in those romantic movies." I laughed, feeling lucky to have a husband who was not only smart and calm but also proud of me. During the holidays, instead of expensive gifts, we chose to make memories. One year, Lucas took me to a small town in Oregon and rented a cabin by the river. We cooked Christmas dinner together, opened wine, and played piano for each other. When I asked, "Do you think we'll always be like this?" Lucas bent down, kissed me, and said, "I can't imagine any other future." It was because of moments like that that I never doubted him. I believed our marriage, with its simple yet solid routines, was a fortress that couldn't be broken. Lucas was my husband, my companion, the person I thought would walk with me until the end of my life. But looking back, I realized something. Even the most familiar piece of music, if you listen closely, can hold notes the player has deliberately hidden. And in the song of our marriage, those hidden notes had started playing long before I noticed. Everything began to change quietly, as if someone had subtly adjusted the rhythm of the piece I'd been playing for 12 years. In the past 6 months, Lucas had been coming home late more often. At first, I thought it was the pressure of his new major projects. But gradually, the reason urgent project with Veronica appeared more and more, becoming almost the default answer whenever I asked. Some nights he came home so late that the meal I prepared had gone cold. I would sit in the kitchen listening to the clock tick, until the door opened and Lucas walked in with a wrinkled shirt and an unfamiliar scent of perfume. I asked softly, "Working with Veronica again?" He took off his coat, smiling lightly as if I'd asked something obvious. Yeah, she needed the draft ready for tomorrow morning's board meeting. I didn't want to miss the chance. I tried to take his answer at face value. Veronica was the vice president in charge of project development, and Lucas had long said she was very sharp in her work. I had thought it was nothing more than professional respect. Then one weekend afternoon, while reviewing the statement for our joint credit card, I noticed charges from high-end restaurants in downtown Seattle, places Lucas and I had never visited together. The receipts clearly stated dinner for two, along with an expensive bottle of wine. When I showed the statement to him, he smiled and spoke as if it were the most ordinary thing. Picky clients, you know. To close a deal, sometimes you have to take them to places like that. He delivered it smoothly without the slightest hesitation. I almost pressed him for more, but I let it go, maybe because I still wanted to believe him, to believe those dinners were truly about work. Another time, while tidying his home office, I found a small, elegant black velvet box in his desk drawer. Inside was a delicate sapphire bracelet. I knew instantly it wasn't for me. My birthday had long passed and Lucas had never bought me that kind of jewelry. When I asked, his calm, unwavering gaze made me feel like a paranoid fool. A gift for a client's daughter. She graduated college and I promised to congratulate her. The reason sounded plausible enough, but something in me stayed unsettled. Natalie, my best friend since high school, had started noticing his changes whenever she visited. One afternoon she looked at me seriously. There's something different about him. Don't take his explanations at face value." I tried to smile and brush it off. "Nat, we've been through so much together." "He wouldn't." "Never hurt you," she cut in, her eyes both sad and resolute. "I'm saying be careful." Still, I clung to the good memories. The piano duets in the evenings, the mornings when he made coffee for me. I told myself I was probably being overly sensitive, that every relationship has tense moments, especially when work is demanding. Even so, the small details kept piling up. Lucas began keeping his phone within reach at all times, even in the shower. When a message came in, he would swipe it away quickly and place the phone face down. Once, in the middle of dinner, his phone buzzed nonstop. I caught a glimpse of the name Veronica flashing on the screen before he quickly silenced it and slipped it into his pocket. "Why is Veronica texting so much?" I asked, keeping my voice even. He shrugged. "She's worried about the progress. In that position, you don't sleep well if the project isn't done." I said nothing, but his answer did nothing to warm the coldness creeping in. One rainy afternoon, I stopped by his office to drop off a new coat I'd bought him, knowing he'd be working late. The receptionist said he'd gone out to meet a client. When I asked who, she hesitated before saying, "I think, with the vice president." I heard the rain pounding against the glass. Once again, I told myself it could have a reasonable explanation, that I shouldn't turn myself into a suspicious wife. But when I got home and opened the fridge to prepare dinner, I found a box of lemon mousse from an upscale bakery. A handwritten label read, "For our wonderful evening, Fee." Lucas had never brought me anything like that, and I certainly hadn't received it from anyone else. That night when he walked in, I held up the box. "What is this?" He glanced at it, then smiled as if I'd caught him in some harmless joke. "Oh, Veronica bought it for the whole team last night. Someone must have left it in my car, so I brought it in." He answered so quickly I had no time to think of a comeback. But no matter how hard I tried, I could feel it. The music we once played together was changing. Lucas was playing melodies I didn't recognize, and the pauses between notes were stretching. The tender look he used to give me had been replaced by hurried glances, as if his mind was always somewhere else, or with someone else, even when he was beside me. I left the dinner party that night without a word, walking out of the ballroom amid faint applause and curious stares. The sound of my heels echoed on the marble floor, each step carrying me further from the man I had trusted for 12 years. When I got home, still in my navy blue dress, I stayed in the dark kitchen without turning on the lights. In that stillness, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I can't stay silent when I see you being deceived. You need to meet me. Elliot Monroe. I knew the name instantly. Elliot was a young architect at Lucas's firm, hired just over a year ago. I'd met him a few times at company events. Polite, quiet, keeping his distance. My instincts told me this wasn't random. I typed back, "Where?" The reply came almost immediately. "Lighthouse Cafe, 8 p.m. tonight. I'll be at the corner table facing the street." Lighthouse Cafe sat on a quiet corner, its glass windows spilling warm yellow light onto the street. When I walked in, Elliot was already there, cradling a cup of hot coffee, his gaze on the window. He rose as soon as he saw me and politely pulled out a chair. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice soft but steady. "I know this isn't an easy conversation. You said in your text, what exactly did you mean?" He chose his words carefully. "I overheard. Actually, I accidentally heard Veronica and Lucas talking in the private meeting room last week." "What did they say?" He pulled a neatly folded sheet of paper from his coat pocket, an email thread, and set it on the table. "They were discussing selling a piece of land in the suburbs, property co-owned by you and Lucas." I frowned. "The land my parents left me?" "Yes." Elliot nodded. "They plan to use it as capital for a private project. Completely separate from the current company, and I'm guessing you had no idea." I looked down at the paper. It was a draft of a financial plan, with the names Lucas Carter and Veronica Hale clearly listed under co-founders. Under secured assets was the chilling line: parcel number 7284, Moonridge Estate, co-owned by L. Carter. Elliot lowered his voice. "I heard Veronica say, Emerson will never know until everything is done." Lucas laughed and replied, "She's busy with her music school, she won't notice." Each word cut deep into the trust I'd been holding on to. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my eyes still fixed on the paper. Elliot sighed. "I could get in trouble for revealing this. But I've seen someone close to me lose everything because they trusted the wrong person. I don't want to see that happen again." I met his gaze. "Are you sure there's no mistake?" "Absolutely sure," he said without hesitation. "And this isn't talk. They've already contacted a broker. Someone even came to see the land last week." I gripped the coffee cup, the steam burning my fingers, but it was nothing compared to the burn in my chest. Elliot slid a small black USB drive across the table. "This has a recording of them discussing it. I don't want to keep it. If you're smart, you'll know what to do with it." I closed my hand around it, both as evidence and as a match that could set everything ablaze. "Thank you, Elliot. You've done something most people would turn away from." He gave a slight nod, paid for both our coffees, and before leaving turned back. "Be careful, Emerson. They're not good at making deals." Back home, I sat in my office, the desk lamp casting light over stacks of files and the tiny USB drive. I plugged it into my computer and pressed play. Veronica's voice came first, cool and clear. "If we sell that land, we'll have enough to start without needing a bank loan. I think we should do it quickly before Emerson notices." Then Lucas's voice, painfully familiar, answered. "She won't suspect a thing. I'll say we need to reinvest for the music school project. She'll believe it." I listened to the entire recording. Every word confirmed my suspicions, piecing together the past 6 months. It was no longer speculation. This was the truth, bare and bitter. In that moment, I understood that what I had heard wasn't only a betrayal in love. It was a calculated scheme aimed at the assets and future I had spent my life building. And if I stayed silent, I would lose everything, both my finances and my self-respect. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. The song we once played together was now nothing but harsh, dissonant notes. But I knew I wouldn't let myself be forced to listen until the end. I spent the entire night after meeting Elliot sitting at my computer, opening every bank account and credit card. The numbers on the screen, once familiar, now glared back at me like damning evidence. In the statements, I saw cash withdrawals of several hundred, even several $1,000s scattered across different days. Transfers to unfamiliar accounts not in our budget, and purchases at stores and restaurants I had never been to. There was a payment at a women's boutique in Portland for over $1,200. Another bill from a lakeside resort 3 hours from Seattle. On the exact weekend Lucas said he had an architecture seminar in Spokane. All of it lined up with the times I had noticed him away from home for days. I printed out all the statements, arranged them into separate files, and marked the suspicious transactions in red ink. Looking at them piled on the table, I felt as if I was holding the score of a meticulously staged symphony of betrayal, waiting for the conductor to turn the page. The next morning I called Harper Gray. I had heard her name from a friend of Natalie's, someone who had escaped a deceitful marriage thanks to her. Harper was known not only for her mastery of divorce and financial law, but also for her fierce determination in protecting her clients. Her voice was deep and decisive from the very first sentence. "I hear you need help. Tell me everything from the beginning." I brought the entire stack of statements and Elliot's USB drive to Harper's downtown office. It was on the 15th floor with large glass windows overlooking the busy traffic below. She wore a charcoal gray suit, her short hair neat, her eyes sharp but not without warmth. After I told her everything, Harper turned each page of the documents, occasionally nodding, sometimes pausing longer at the unreasonable expenses I had marked. "You have a good start, Emerson," she said, pushing the stack of papers toward me. "But what you have right now is only documented suspicion. If you want to corner Lucas so he can't deny it, you need solid proof." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Things the court and public opinion can't dispute. Photos, recordings, signed documents, direct transfers tied to Veronica. And not that, we need to prove motive, why he did it and what he planned to use the money for." I sat up straighter, feeling like I was stepping into a battle I had never imagined before. Harper gave a small smile as if sensing my tension. "I'll introduce you to Miles Porter, a private investigator I trust. He used to be a detective in financial crimes, very skilled at finding what others try to hide." We met Miles at a small diner near the harbor. He was in his early 40s, tall, with sun-weathered skin and deep brown eyes that scanned his surroundings out of habit. From the first handshake, I could sense his steadiness, as if nothing escaped his attention. Miles let me tell the entire story again, taking meticulous notes. When I handed him the statements and the USB, he set them aside and asked, "Emerson, are you ready to hear the whole truth, even if it's worse than you imagine?" "If I don't know the truth, I'll always be led along." "Good. I'll start by tracking Lucas's financial transactions over the past 90 days, checking his work schedule against his off-hours activities. If necessary, I'll place a GPS tracker on his car and collect images from public cameras." I hesitated. "Is that legal?" "Completely, if done properly and with consent from a co-owner of the property or vehicle, which in this case is you," Miles explained. "The important thing is to collect evidence in a way that, once in court, his lawyer can't dismiss." Harper interjected, "I'll make sure everything is done within the law. Emerson, your job is to cooperate, provide information, and stay calm." Over the next 2 weeks, Miles sent me short but thorough reports. He found a series of cash withdrawals that matched the days Lucas and Veronica had project meetings outside the office. Restaurant camera footage showed them together, dining with gestures far beyond professional boundaries. One evening, Miles sent me a short video taken from a distance. Lucas and Veronica leaving a boutique hotel in the Capitol Hill area, his arm around her waist, smiling as she whispered something to him. I watched the clip several times, not out of surprise, but because I needed to etch the truth into my memory, so I would never soften again for his smooth explanations. 3 days later, Miles asked me to meet him at his small office, where the walls were covered with maps, photos, and whiteboards full of notes. He pulled out a chair for me, then placed a thick file on the desk. "Emerson, you should prepare yourself. I think you need to know everything." I opened the file. The first page was a series of photos of Lucas and Veronica together. Not evenings after work like I'd seen before, but trips away. One photo made me stop cold. A wooden cabin by Whistler Lake, the autumn sky ablaze, and Lucas unloading a suitcase from the trunk. Veronica stood close beside him, her arm on his shoulder, both of them smiling as if the outside world didn't exist. I remembered that weekend well. Lucas had said he needed to go to Spokane for an architecture conference, told me to stay home, relax, and treat myself to a few days off. I had believed him, even packing him breakfast to take along. Now this photo was like a mirror reflecting my own naivety. Miles flipped to the next section of the file, pointing to a stack of notarized documents. This is more important. I found the registration for a new company called Hale Carter Design Group. Veronica is listed as CEO. Lucas is co-founder and creative director. Carter, he used my last name? And here's the part that bothers me most. He pulled out a copy of a loan agreement. In the collateral section, Lucas used the Moonridge property, the inheritance from your parents, as security. My eyes went wide at the printed line. Collateral. Parcel number 7284 Moonridge Estate, co-owned by Emerson Carter and Lucas Carter. Below was Lucas's signature, signing my name as well. He forged my signature? My voice trembled with a mix of anger and disbelief. Based on the signature samples from your driver's license and home purchase documents, yes. This is a serious criminal offense. He could be prosecuted, Miles said. I leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath, feeling both chilled and burning. The Moonridge property wasn't an asset. It was my last living memory of my parents. My father used to take me there every summer, teaching me to identify each tree along the shore and to listen to the morning bird song. After my parents passed away, I kept the land untouched, planning one day to build an outdoor music academy there. And now Lucas had turned it into a bargaining chip in his scheme with Veronica. Miles sat quietly, giving me time to compose myself, then continued. I also discovered that Veronica is secretly approaching key staff and longtime clients of Davidson Hale, their current firm, offering higher salaries and lucrative contracts if they move to the new company once it launches. Lucas is acting as the creative bait for the clients. I frowned. So they're not only betraying me, they're sabotaging the very company that pays them? Exactly. And if this comes to light, both will face serious consequences. Losing their jobs, being sued for breach of contract, and potentially being investigated for fraud. Emerson, Miles hesitated. I know this isn't easy, but I advise you to keep all of this to yourself. If Lucas or Veronica finds out you know, they'll try to erase evidence or move assets elsewhere. Don't worry. From now on, every word I say, every move I make will be calculated. Harper came to Miles's office that same afternoon. After scanning through the file, she narrowed her eyes. This is gold for the case. Forgery, using marital assets without consent, colluding to set up a competing company. We're not talking about divorce anymore, Emerson. This is financial fraud, breach of trust, and contract violations. So, what do we do? Harper leaned toward me, her gaze unwavering. We're going to let them feel so secure they think they're untouchable. Then we'll drop all the evidence at the moment it will hurt them most, both legally and publicly. I clenched my hands, feeling for the first time in months that I had control of the story again. Lucas had thought I was the wife who stood quietly behind him, managing the books and smiling at his success. But soon he would learn that I knew how to rewrite music too, and I was about to turn his composition into a requiem. The next morning I woke earlier than usual. The sky outside was still hazy, pale light streaking silver over the sea. I sat at the dining table, opened my laptop, and began a task I had never imagined, protecting my own assets from the man I had shared a bed with. The first step was freezing our joint accounts. I called the bank. The representative's voice was polite and steady, but "We'll take care of that right away," felt like pulling another fuse from the bomb Lucas had planted in my home. I requested a temporary freeze on online transactions and all linked cards, and set up two-step verification using only my personal information. Next, I contacted the branch manager, someone who had met with both of us many times, to revoke Lucas's authority on the power of attorney for our assets. She seemed slightly surprised but didn't ask questions, only confirmed, "If that's your wish, Emerson, we'll proceed immediately. From now on, any transaction involving this asset will require your signature and presence." I thanked her, hung up, and felt a strange emptiness. Not from loss, but from realizing how long I had handed over control to someone who never deserved it. Harper called at noon. "I want you to start collecting everything. Contracts, invoices, emails, any messages between you and Lucas or between him and Veronica that you can access. Recordings too if you have any." I gave a faint smile. "I already have a few things." He tends to leave his phone on the kitchen counter when he showers. That afternoon, I dug through Lucas's old tablet, the one he'd forgotten about after buying a new iPad. I wasn't someone who snooped without reason, but at this point, every piece of data could be an important puzzle piece. In his inbox, I found a few emails from Veronica, the tone far more intimate than necessary between colleagues. One had the subject line, "Last night's draft," and attached was a photo of Lucas at his desk, holding a glass of wine. On the table was not only a set of design plans, but also a dinner for two. I transferred every email to an external hard drive, labeling the time and subject carefully. Then I opened the recording app on my phone and replayed the clips I had captured when Lucas accidentally left his phone on speaker. Once I'd heard him tell Veronica, "Don't worry, Emerson will sign. She trusts me completely." At the time I thought I had misheard. Now that sentence was undeniable proof of his arrogant confidence. That evening Harper and I met at her office. On the table we spread out every photo, email, statement, recording, and the paperwork for the new company. Harper pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose and looked at me. "Emerson, this is a complete case file. If we filed it right now we could win big. But I want to wait." "Wait for what?" I asked. "For the moment when they feel most secure. When both Lucas and Veronica believe no one can touch them. Hitting them then will make them lose everything in a single day." Harper was right. This wasn't about divorce. This was a fight that needed an outcome so decisive they couldn't recover with either reputation or money. In the days that followed, I lived two parallel lives. In front of Lucas, I was still the composed wife, asking about his work, making dinner, letting him believe I suspected nothing. But the moment he left the house, I became the evidence gatherer, calling Miles for updates, sending Harper new documents, checking every new transaction. One evening, Lucas came home late, the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his collar. He said he was preparing for the company's big presentation. I smiled, poured him a glass of red wine, and made small talk. In my mind, the plan was already taking shape. That very presentation would be the stage for their downfall. I knew I was no longer the woman who believed every word her husband said. I was rewriting my story, and this time, every word would be mine to choose. 2 weeks later, I stepped into the grand hall. The warm gold light spilling over every vaulted ceiling, the soft clink of crystal glasses mingling with polite laughter. It was all like a glittering tableau built to glorify Lucas and his sustainable future project. But for me, this wasn't the launch of a new company. This was the stage where their true faces would be exposed. I wore a navy satin dress that caught the light with every movement. Each step through the crowd was steady, but underneath was a current ready to break. Lucas stood at the podium, his voice low and confident. "We believe Davidson Hale will redefine the way the world views sustainable architecture." Veronica sat in the front row, her golden hair in soft waves, her smile radiant as if the event belonged to her alone. The VIP guests nodded, a few glancing my way as they noticed me standing in the corner. When Lucas proudly spoke about long-term vision, the back doors opened. 2 process servers in plain suits walked straight to the podium, their strides deliberate. The click of their shoes on marble echoed through the hall, now silent. The taller one spoke evenly, "Lucas Carter?" "Veronica Hale." Lucas hesitated, then gave a polite smile. "Yes. You've been served. Civil summons for financial fraud, breach of business contract, and misuse of marital assets." The microphone carried his words across the hall. Veronica's face drained of color, and Lucas tried to stay composed, but his hand clenched the papers so tightly the veins stood out. I stepped from the rows of chairs toward the stage, the sound of my heels matching the rapid clicks of camera shutters. When I stopped a few steps away, I looked him straight in the eye. "This is for the land my parents left me, and for the 12 years I gave up my career for you to destroy." The hall was so quiet I could hear the sharp intakes of breath. Some guests whispered while news cameras turned toward me. I didn't need to shout. Every word carried enough weight to press down on the room like a heavy fog. Lucas looked toward the crowd as if searching for a way out, but the faces of former colleagues and clients were cold. One former board member smirked. "I told you not to touch marital property." Veronica bowed her head, lips trembling, still trying to keep her composure. From the back of the hall, Harper gave me a small nod. She didn't need to speak. I knew we had struck at exactly the right time. The complete file, photos, and financial evidence had already been sent to both the court and the press. A reporter stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, do you have any comment on using your wife's inherited property as collateral for a loan without her consent?" Lucas had no words. In that instant, I saw him for who he truly was. Not the man who once promised to protect me, but someone willing to sacrifice anyone to get what he wanted. I stepped back, letting the silence stretch. The whole hall hung in that suspended moment, and I knew Lucas and Veronica's image would never be whole again. On the morning of the True Note Academy opening in the prep room, I faced the mirror, adjusting the cream silk scarf at my neck. In the reflection, I saw a woman who no longer trembled at the past. Every corner of the room carried sound. The piano being tuned, the laughter of the first students, the light breeze through the tall windows. Harper arrived early, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. She set them on the table and smiled. "You look ready." I replied calmly, ready for a real beginning. Miles was there too, leaning against the doorway, eyes glinting with humor. "You know, there's local press here today. They want to write about the woman who turned a fall into a new song." I smiled faintly. Let them hear the story through the music. Outside, the seats were full. Local families, donors, and a few old friends who had known me before any of this happened. I even recognized a few faces from Lucas's former board, sitting in the back, silent but curious. When the ceremony began, I stepped onto the small stage. No grand microphone or LED screen, just a piano in the center, warm light spilling over the keys. I set my hands on them, letting the opening notes fill the room. A piece I had written in the days when I thought I had lost everything. Midway through, I paused and looked at the audience. True Note is not a music school. It's a place where I believe everyone has the right to live true to their own melody, even if it's been interrupted or distorted. A round of applause filled the room. I saw Harper give a subtle nod and Miles let out a soft whistle. After the ceremony, groups of students were led into their new classrooms. The walls were painted in warm tones, bookshelves lined with textbooks and photos of legendary musicians. In the corner, an old violin, my parents' gift, was displayed in a glass case with a small plaque, "For honest beginnings." While I was speaking with a parent, an older man approached. He had once been on Lucas's board of directors. He spoke slowly. "I thought you'd disappear after that collapse. Today I see I was wrong. Sometimes loss is the only way to reclaim something more important, yourself." That afternoon, after the guests had gone, I stayed alone in the music room. The late-day sunlight streamed through the window, spilling over the black and white keys. I sat down and played the same melody from that morning, but this time without the weight. Outside, life went on. The media was still reporting on the state licensing board's investigation into Veronica, and Lucas was fighting for permission to practice in another state. But within these walls, I had something they could never buy: unconditional peace. Miles poked his head through the door. "Celebrating tonight?" "To celebrate what we've kept, and the notes not yet written." He laughed. "That's the Emerson I know, the one who always knows how to end a chapter with an open chord." The sea breeze slipped through the large hall windows, carrying the gentle scent of salt and the distant sound of waves. I sat at the grand piano, my hands resting lightly on the cool keys. Afternoon light poured through the glass, coating everyone in warm gold. Harbor Dawn began with low notes, like the deep breath of early morning, then unfolded into brighter, stronger sounds. I had written it in my hardest days, when I thought I'd never find a peaceful harbor of my own. Today I played it not only for myself but for everyone who had walked through darkness to find light. As the melody carried me further, I glanced toward the front row. Natalie sat there, her blonde hair neatly tied back, her blue eyes shining with unspoken pride. Harper sat with her arms crossed, head tilted, lips curved in the smile of someone who knew exactly how hard I had fought to get here. Beside them, Miles nodded to the beat, tapping his knee, his polished brown shoes catching the light. Then, among the familiar faces, I saw someone else. Graham Ellis. Toward the back of the hall, he lingered with his hands in his pockets, tall, lean, and steady. The same warm gaze, the way he looked as though he was truly listening, not to the music but to the story in each note. My heart skipped a beat. We had met during late evenings at the small cafe down the street, when he was still in town finishing an unfinished novel. Unplanned conversations, Sometimes a few words about books or the ocean breeze had been enough to make me feel seen. He left before I had finished my plans with Lucas, and I hadn't expected to see him again. My fingers glided over the keys, bringing the piece to its climax. Chords crashed like waves against rock, then softened unexpectedly, opening into an ending as light as morning mist. In the silence before the applause, I looked up. Graham was still there, a small smile on his lips. No urging, no demands, simply present. After the performance ended, I waited backstage, accepting hugs, congratulations, and fragrant bouquets. Natalie handed me a cup of hot tea, speaking softly. I've heard you play this since the first draft. But today, it's different. It feels like you've truly dropped anchor. I let out a soft laugh. Maybe. Or at least, I'm not afraid of the ocean anymore. Harper stepped in, wrapping her arms around both of us. Enough with the metaphors, come on. Someone's waiting. Before I could ask who, Harper tilted her head toward the end of the hallway. Graham was leaning casually against the wall, hands still in his pockets as if he could stand there all day. I walked toward him, step by steady step, without rushing. Long time no see. I heard about the academy, and about today's performance, he said, his eyes never leaving mine. I thought, if I didn't come, I might regret it for the rest of my life. Silence stretched between us for a few seconds, broken only by the murmur of conversation and the echo of guests' footsteps. How long are you staying in town? I asked. Not sure. Maybe longer than planned, if there's a reason. I smiled without answering. Instead, I nodded toward the lounge where the students were laughing. Come in, everyone will want to meet you. He followed but kept just enough distance to let me know he wouldn't push his way in unless I was ready. Amid the lively hum of the gathering, I realized I didn't have to define everything right away. My life had once been consumed by plans, expectations, things that had to be right by someone else's standards. Now I could let things unfold naturally. Graham stood in the corner talking with Harper about books he loved. Natalie was showing a new student how to place her fingers on the piano keys. Miles was chatting with a few parents about the academy's schedule. And I, for the first time, felt I was in the right place at the right time. I knew there would be new music, new faces, and maybe even new feelings ahead. But today this was enough. Life sometimes takes us through turbulent turns, only to lead us one day to a peaceful shore reached by our own hands. For me, Harbor Dawn was more than a piece of music. It was a reminder that after every loss, we can still find truth and new connections. And what about you?
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.